Here we go. Do that in camera. That's it. There we go. There we go. Take that edge through. Now, we're close there. I'm going to go one more pass lighter here. If I can get that to where I'm closer to where I want it here. There we go. And keep this edge clean and crisp. I'm not pushing down. I'm just kind of reaffirming it without really drawing too heavy or drawing too dark. Just want to be very careful with it. Right into there. It's going pretty well. Okay. That's that's really close to where that value wants to be, or should be in relationship to the image actually. So we'll take that here. So it's a little bit lighter than that lip, and I'm going to fade off pretty quickly in through here and here. But this needs to go all the way to the tip of the cone. Can go a little bit lighter actually. There we go. So I'll come over here and have here in camera. Now I could fade it off a little bit darker than what's in the image, and I think I'll do that just for effect. Really make an issue running it off. That means I'm going to go a little bit darker and leave it about like that. That's a little bit darker of a fade than what's on camera, but maybe not too much. Maybe it's actually closer than what I think. So I'm going to catch this edge just a little bit there to pop out a clean edge. And then I'm going to come over here now to the pyramid's dark plane. I'm going to take off the little line work in between. You should be able to see that in 4K. It's a sketch though. Some of the extra lines are fine. So this plane, relate this plane to this dark value. They're not the same. We're darker here, and we want to be darker overall than here. Actually relate these two together, here and here. These two planes, they're really the same, pretty close. It gets maybe a little bit lighter over here, but they're pretty close. So we want to really essentially have the same thing here as we do here with these two. So start relating ideas in your drawing back to one another. All right, so to do that, we start just simply glaze over, and I'm way over here with that value right in through there to here. So very lightly. And by the way, it's a pretty small drawing, 9 by 12, just for the sake of the camera. But these processes are the same no matter what size you use. Scale doesn't really change the elements and principles of concept. What does change is the physicality of what you do by and large by measurable exponents. The larger and bigger you draw, the more physical it starts to really get on you, especially if you're a little older. So, but that shouldn't stop you from working big, but just FYI on that. So I'm working this plane here, working pretty well, and just glossing over here. So I'll keep it a little bit darker along the lip and a little bit lighter in the middle, just slightly perceptually. I want a nice graduated sort of look and feel to the light. Okay, we're getting the sensation of atmosphere and light. In order to do that, we've got to be soft when we need to have soft edges, hard when we need to have hard edges, and lots of subtle little transitions to make that work out for us better. I think that's working pretty well through here. Okay, now it's looking pretty good. There's a little light that's coming back over that reflected little edge because that forms the molecules there. For whatever reason, it's a little more transparent along the tip of the edge. So I can show that. I don't know if it's a molecular thing. Don't want to do bad science there. Okay, there's already enough of that out in the real world. Good science. Here we go. Okay, so that's working pretty well, I think. Now I'm going to come over here and catch this edge here that's a little bit lighter. I think that works pretty well in through here. Just a lighter touch in through here. I think that's working pretty well. Come over here to the corner of the pyramidal tip, and it's kind of squared off a little bit, so it's a little bit lighter underneath here. Right in through there. And it gets lightest in this little plain edge at the tip here. We'll just catch that. Soften this a little bit and let that just fade over. And come up and through over here. And now we're working in this region of the drawing. Now take a look. If I'm taking my little circle where I'm looking at in terms of my value relationships, this dip is space between here and the edge of the boundary, which were cropped, shortened a little bit in my drawing. It's pretty similar to the plane here, right? So it's pretty close. So the value difference between here and here are pretty close. Okay, just keep that in mind. So I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to start adding a little value in the background tone here, not a whole lot. And you can see we gradually go a little lighter in through here. Now I can either make this lighter or make this a little bit darker. I'm not sure which yet. that just to play off a change, because they can't be the same value, because they're really not. They're close. That's why we can see them distinctively, but they're close. So we'll take this value here. We'll just run this in to gloss over all that in through here. There we go. And I think I'm going to leave the value outside of the pyramidal plane a little, just a slightly darker then. So I'll catch that edge, clean that up, and I'll leave this just a little bit darker. But notice how I run my pencil into everything? I'm just drawing so lightly. That's not going to matter. It has a way of giving it an atmospheric quality and resolution to it. A lot of people try to work the outside boundary so much and little halos around. You don't have to do that. So we're working in through here. Coming over here through here, taking great pains. So I think it's probably now it's time to add the light on that sphere. Because that light on that sphere is getting hit hotter, closer to the farther right of the light edge there and through there. So it's probably time to hit it. And it's because it's lighter than either of these values next to it a little bit. So we can start to lay that in now. So we'll go a step further, how we blocked in. And then I'm going to keep on going. Another step. And start to come over here and soften now the core shadow over and through here, especially right in through here, as we start to work now the back side of the object, reflected light. So this object, the reason why this has a little halo here is the light source over here, it's hitting object that light's bouncing back onto that reflected light. That reflected light's pretty strong, but notice it's not as strong as direct lighting. Direct lighting will always be the strongest unless you have multiple light sources on either side of an object, then that's not reflected light anymore. That's two direct light sources. So we're coming over into here. And I'm going to catch this edge of the sphere a little bit, catch that in through here. There we go. So it's starting to block in starting to come up a little bit in terms of its resolution. And that core shadow is a darker core shadow. It might be the darkest core shadow of all the objects. Right in through, I'm talking about right in through here. So I might have to go back, probably go back and dab erase at that and take that out just a little bit further. So now I'm going to come to the sphere now and take another pass at it and go a little bit lighter and hotter right in through here. And just do this in waves. Coming through, catching the edge here. And this is slightly darker form shadow. And this is the highlight, or 1s and 2s, or at least properties of light 1s and 2s. Light, almost a highlight. There's not a real glossy highlight, but this is the lightest part for sure. And then downward in here. Catch this edge one more time. Right through here. There we go. And just keep on working to modulate. Right in through here. So it's brightest a little bit in the middle of the sphere because of where the light source is located. Catch that. We'll clean up this edge in a moment. Of that sphere, it's working pretty well. So now I'll put in this reflected light halo that we see. So it's a little bit darker in this core shadow area, and then on this side it gets lighter. Then it's a little bit darker than the plane of this pyramid, so I may go one step lighter. See how I'm adjusting here? So let's lay that in. Okay, so now I've lost my core shadow a little bit, so I'll go back and catch that in a moment. Through here. So that's pretty close. All right. So I'll come back and catch this a little bit. Then I'll take my kneaded eraser, and I'll dab off, and I'll take maybe just a pinch, about that big, really tiny, not a whole lot. And I can come over and start to dab that through a little bit. Start to take that out and reconstitute where that core shadow wants to be a little bit. Take great pains to keep it soft. It's working pretty well. And I can continue to blend some in through here. Continue to work it soft. Now we could spend more hours to get really rough, finite, but I won't. I'll put everybody in a coma. There we go, through here. Okay. It's working pretty well through there. So I'm going to take out, come across over here, I'm going to take out this little lip. And I can recapture that. And still lighten it up when I have to go back and take off that a little bit. Let me straighten this back up. There we go. Okay. And catch this edge. Just reconstitute this edge a little bit against here. And come over here a little bit. There we go. Because this cylinder shadow is going to be a little lighter against it, so I'm going to go ahead and do that and show you that. Right in through all this will just be a little bit lighter. It brings that ball to resolution here. We'll catch that in a minute. Here we go. So when I draw this edge, I've got to draw just a little bit on the outside. I'm drawing actually the cylinder reflected light around it to make sure I've got the edge how I want it. Keep that in mind. That's important. So this looks pretty good. Just a little bit brighter here. They're so close together, the pyramid value and that reflected light. It's wonderful to see that. And this edge is just a little bit sharper, but it gives it kind of a glow. Right in through there. I think that's looking pretty decent in through here. So we'll capture this edge back in through here. Catch the edge of this ball a little bit. Try to keep my head out of the way. There we go. It's working pretty well, I think. Again, I can bring this back over. That edge is a little bit tighter now. Through here. And just a little bit lighter over here, too, as well. Okay. All right, I think we're working pretty well. I'm going to soften up this core shadow right in here just a little bit, just a little value, just to take off a little bit of the bite on it. But I think it's working pretty well in through there. And if I feel like this was a little too light running through here, I can just barely take off. Dab with that, just a touch. I'm barely pushing down. I think that's plenty, especially for a little quick sketch, however long this takes. Okay, so I think that works pretty well. I'm going to come back and catch this edge again. Notice I say that a lot. I catch edges, catch your edge, catch your edge. Always reconstitute your edges. Make sure they're crisp where you need them and they're soft where you need them. You can't be overemphasized, really. Continue to tweak that. I think I'm ready to go on now to the cylinder as we're getting close now to resolution. So we'll bring up the cylinder here. Now remember, I changed the angle of the cylinder a little bit from I changed our eye level of the cylinder and brought the curve, since it was a flat curve at eye level, which is really a little awkward when you have a straight line like that. You're used to a curve and you want to see a curve. Your audience wants to see a curve, and so we give them a curve either underneath as we're looking above, or it was easier to curve that over and raise it up a little bit, which makes it better. So I'm going to add now the light over here against the cylinder and against a little bit of shadow of the sphere over here. We're just going to pop that core shadow out. That's why it was already pretty dark. That's why I actually softened it a little bit. So let's start to add that through. So we'll take it in layers. That's why it takes a little longer to make it work really well. Soften and blend a little bit. They'll come over. So we're going to work that edge right in through here. I'm going to turn this drawing now so I can get that edge of that ball a little bit through there. So now I'm drawing the outside edge of the ball. I'm really drawing light on the cylinder, but I need to get that edge crisp. That's important, or crisper just a little bit to make that work. My head's not too much in the way. Here we go. It's working decent. So keep it like that. I'll bring up this light. And make it hottest a little bit running through here where I've got it going on. And it fades a little bit as it gets to the core shadow and reflected light. That's working pretty well. It doesn't have a distinct highlight, so we're going to catch that edge in through here. That made my cylinder a little wider than looks like what the image is. Do a little bit. It's okay. Catch that edge a little bit, make it crisp, so it reads sharply against the backside boundary, backside backdrop, if you will. All right, so we've got that. Okay, so I'm going to come back over, reposition the drawing. Here we go. Okay, so we're looking pretty good there. Now we've got some refinement to do in the core shadow and reflected light, really all over in every region of the cylinder here. Okay, all right, so overall the shadow is it's close to where it needs to be. So I'm actually gonna take and maybe just slightly darken in the core shadow of it, and then also right the core of the sphere running through there. Make that pop out a little bit further. So we'll take this down a little bit. I'll kind of just drag it since it's wax. It doesn't really smear. I'll just drag it through and darken that darker than it needs to be, so I can manipulate that again. I can soften that. So it's a little bit darker than it is now, or in the image, and we can start to soften this a little bit, soften those edges, and then also reduce the contrast both at the same time. So I'll come across the form like so to do that. Do there. This is looking pretty good, and then I'm going to start to lighten up over here because of that reflected light now, so we can bring out that core shadow a little further without having to draw it too dark or make it any darker. You can actually make it darker by drawing the reflected light. I think here works pretty well. So I think we're getting close there to what I want out of the cylinder. So I'll take now and find this edge, reconstitute the back edge a little bit. Bring that value up against that edge, above that edge, strengthen up that edge. There we go. Through there. A little bit lighter, just a touch, but soft. Soft transition. I think we're going to be pretty close there. So I'm going to come back now and catch this edge up here of the cylinder a little bit. Make it nice and tight. Tight against that backdrop a little bit. So I might come along and take the eraser here and work against that just a little bit, even though I'll make it the background darker, but I can soften it up just a little bit. Reconstitute, get that edge, recapture. That edge, I've turned that curve a little bit where I wanted it. Strengthen an edge, and I can come back and say, okay, this background can go a little softer and a little lighter. Both. Right in through here, but not by a whole lot, but right through there. And then up here, just a little bit, just barely. And then we've got a little bit of play going on here. Take this edge, I want to make this crisper. I might take my white eraser. Here's something I'll show you. This edge is pretty blunt, so I'm going to take my knife here and I'm going to cut this edge out just a little bit. Okay, and I made a nice sharp edge with a little cutout, and I'm going to come across here and erase really tightly that edge. I wanted a sharper edge there, and I got it. Can't always get your needed eraser. The Japanese mono erasers are great. I left them at my home studio. I didn't bring them. The absent-minded professor. That's what my wife calls me, the absent-minded professor. That's not very nice of her, but she's right. You get the idea. You just want that hard edge, a little bit harder edge. I want to make this a little bit lighter. And I'm going to come across and catch this edge. I'm drawing the shadow. I'm not drawing the core shadow of the ball. I'm drawing outside of it just a little bit. And I'm bringing it up against that edge to make it nice and tight. That's important. Right in there is important. Really important to get to come together. There we go. It works pretty well. Not bad. Now I'm going to draw inside the sphere here to get that edge, crisp edge, here, and there a little bit. And it works pretty well. So this background can go a little lighter in through here. It's working pretty well. It's all about edges and contrasts and light and value. Okay. Getting pretty close there. Tweak this out, make this lip a little stronger, catch a little light there on the lip of an object, just a touch. I'll bring that out. And I'm going to take, to alter this a little bit, I'm going to take this plane, I'm going to make a real flat little dabbing device, I'm going to take this all of it down, just a touch. It's a little light. I can show you that. Take this down by dabbing into it, and I can soften it back up. Because I've taken out, I can see where I can take it a little bit too much. So I want the sphere to pop out a little bit more than the cylinder. Okay, so I've got that. It's perceptually very minor, I get it. Right into there. Tighten it in. I think we're looking pretty good. They're pretty tight. Okay. So now let's tweak this out a little bit, tighten this up in tiny little areas, and I'll try to finish that out in less than 5 minutes. Okay, let's do that now. Okay, tweaking tools. Let's talk about maybe adding a little bit of dimension to the drawing in terms of what we can use to clear up and clean up our edges when we need to, a little finite tool. So here I've got in front of me a little rotating electric eraser. You can kind of hear it move. You just push the button. It's battery powered, and it erases away really nicely. Okay, and then we have the Japanese mono erasers, which are great to use here. They come in different tips, you can see, right here and also here for erasing, and actually a little bit of a charcoal pencil. I'll show you that in a second. So looking at my image, I might do well to have a few little areas of hard edges, and I just got out of class teaching, and I left my other tools in there, so I'll just use these. I can't get it all together. So I'm just going to put a little line there, a little cleaner line there. I'm going to just erase it out, which I did there. Let's see, where else can I have a little cleaner line that I want? Use a little dark value, so maybe right just in here. I'm going to clean up that edge. Here, a little tweaking edge. It's very, very perceptibly slight. Just a cleaning little edge to clean off that. Maybe I'll come around here on this edge. I'm using the Japanese mono eraser. They're wonderful to use. Little tiny little hard erasers. They're wonderful to have. Clean up that little edge there. It's kind of nice. Maybe in this core shadow, right in through here, I want it to be a little bit darker, so I can take my other mono eraser and go right in through here just a touch. Bring that out a little bit further. Right through there. Now it's wax pencil, so it doesn't erase easily, which is kind of nice. You kind of have to work at it a little bit further. And then I'm going to take and clean up this edge in through here a little bit of this ball. Sometimes it can be tricky when you're working with spherical objects to, especially when they're round, you've got all these edges that come back and keep it round. You kind of have to work hard at it. That's why drawing ellipses and drawing circles, practicing those can be very important. So this could be a little lighter, right in through here, just barely. Keep that lighter on there. A little bit of lighter touch on that. And I might take off a little bit of this lip right in through here. So really working to clean out the edge best I can. And if it gets too strong with the line kind of quality, I can come back and soften that up a little bit with a little bit more line. So it actually is a little bit lighter about right into here. Right in through there. We can lighten that up a bit. And maybe right in through here. A little lighter, hard-edged. So I left my triangles in the studio classroom, so I gotta go back in. Teach another class, but I thought I would finish this little section of this video, just kind of a tweaking section there like that. And then maybe I want an edge down here, a little stronger on the pyramid box, right in through here, so I can take one of my monos and just take a tight little edge and do it against this a little bit. So clean up those edges. It's very, very slight, perceptually just really slight. I can clean this edge up if it gets a little blurry. That's the blunt one, and I can take the really, really thin one. Those are nice to have. These are great to have. Really strong little erasers. There. You know, the electric eraser, let me use that for a second. Let's say I want to take off this little lip. That's a nice little gadget. In the US, they're about $30 or $40. Now, I've got some heavy-duty architectural ones that are in the hundreds of dollars, and boy, they're great. They're in my home studio. They're pretty expensive. So I might take this edge off here, this extra material, kind of digging through there. You can see it kind of dig here, kind of dig. It's kind of nice. That cleans that up a little bit, so we can continue to clean the drawings up even further. So if I want a little edge here at the bottom, a little better edge, catch that. And if I want to take this white line out, make a darker line, actually, you can do that. And then lastly, you can take your charcoal pencil. Okay, just be careful, don't overdraw with it. Just now you're dark on dark, right? But you can perceptually have a little dark line if you want there. You can see that. And right in this little edge, I'll kind of point out, just put a little tipping point there. That's kind of a nice little edge too, as well. Keep that very minimal, very soft. I don't use a whole lot. Matter of fact, I rarely use it at all, but sometimes it's kind of nice. I'll put a little crispy edge here, there, and then come back and catch this on the back, line that up, catch that edge a little bit into there. And then maybe I'll take this back edge off with that light. So, tweaking tools to make your drawing even clearer and edgier and stronger when you need them to be. Okay. So I think that takes care of it. There we go. So now we worked on the darker toned paper, which gives you a nice sense, I think, of kind of a nocturnal value, or starting from a darker place and going to adding your lighter values. But we still separated our drawing into light and dark shadow pattern, right? And then we built up our values through the light, and then we built up our core shadows to help illuminate the turn of the objects, right, of course, and then also that helps with reflected light. And we're putting together properties of light, value, our value scale range. Over here we changed our perspective a little bit when we needed that, or when I needed that. And we also demonstrated kind of refinement with the piece of paper, and then of course now we're just tweaking a little bit and changing it up. So I'm just giving it a little line in through there. Barely pushed down the charcoal at all. And I think that's plenty good. Maybe running through here. Might look pretty good. In through there. Okay, there you go. Hope you liked it. So we'll keep going with the basic section and toned papers and other materials, and pen and ink, some fountain pens, etc. And we'll keep going, and we'll continue to get a little bit more complex as we go along. So keep watching, stay tuned, and we will present our next drawing problem to solve. Okay, there you go. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye. Go. Take care. See you next time. Bye-bye.
This ain't no boring burger. This is Arby's cheesesteak.
I looked a lot different. I started my degree in 1986, and 30 years later decided to complete my goals. The support system that you get with Purdue Global, just being in the military, you actually get assigned a person who will stay with you and walks you through step by step. Earning my degree with Purdue Global has given me the confidence to show me that I am not too old. I can do it. This is my comeback.
All right, so we're back now, and we're going to be working now with ink on toned paper. Okay, so let's talk about the materials I'm going to be using. Now I've got an ink pen, a fountain pen here, and the ink. So this is a Falcon Pilot Falcon pen, and they're fairly expensive, but you don't need anything highly expensive. You can use India ink in a pen, or you can use a Pitt pen. That's totally fine. The technique is the same, but I love fountain pens, and they make a nice, wonderful drawing tool. So I'm going to be using the Pilot pen here. And this is called the Justice. And then the ink I'm using is a Japanese ink here, and it's called Adzukiro number 6, and it's kind of a reddish, a dark maroon tone. So just keep that in mind. But you can use black, you could use a brown, you can use other inks as well. So I'll put that to the side. Then I'll be using, for highlight, lighter dark form shadow, I'll be using white chalk, not the Prismacolor, but the white chalk. And for erasing, kneaded erasers, big white eraser, and then if I need any of the other mono erasers or the electric eraser, I'll be using that too as well. So let's get started. So I'll move these out of the way a little bit, and let's just talk about drawing on the toned paper. We've already done if you've seen the other demos, you've seen this a little bit. I'm just going to use the ink pen too as well, just to show you. Get in here, make sure this we can see on our camera. So it sits on the surface really nicely. The tone paper I have is Canson tone paper, and it's called light blue. It is number 490, light blue. And the tone of the ink is a little bit redder, so it is kind of maroonish in value. So we have a mid-tone value, our darkest value, our mid-tone value here, right? And then our lightest value, of course, will be with the chalk. And then we can get pretty light with that, you know, pretty quick. And that's about as light as you can get it right in the beater. Kind of when all the paper disappears, you get that lightest value. Now, in terms of mark making, we have a little bit different mark making strategy. I prefer mostly hatching, and that is stroking direction at different various intervals when you draw. And sometimes cross hatching. So if we have hatching that is in one direction, when we mean cross hatching, I'll just put an X for cross. So cross hatching. Then we mean going opposite or at angles to that hatching. Mark to build up a darker value, or you can add hatching to what you have already here in the same same direction, which I like to do sometimes too as well. Or sometimes I'll do a minor crosshatch. Now I can continue to hatch here and come across in the more late. Layers I get, obviously the darker it gets to render value. So you're going to find and explore edge control, as well as obviously form drawing, different attitudes or different ways of getting value and contrast. Let me get that down a bit, right? But also trying to get more gradated, softer edges when you use hatching and or cross hatching. So the longer we go, the darker the value gets where we hatch the most. You can see that starting to get, you know, it's still not as dark as here where it's all complete and through there. I could probably make one more pass and it would start to just get oozy dark in there. So we can start to build up value in terms of layers, right, of cross hatching and or hatching, either one. And then when we're using the white charcoal, generally just kind of how you've seen it done before, just kind of softly kind of gradate. And again, I still keep the lightest values or the light form value out of the paper tone, which is still about a 4 or 5 in the value scale. So I don't mix the two values. So if I hatch it over a little bit, you can start to get that feeling crudely. Now, another thing too, students have little problems with sometimes is getting those values right in through this area. So about a little bit darker than our mid-tone value in here. So one tried and true technique is the more you leave space in between those hatch marks, you allow more of that mid-tone value to show through. So we have a lighter value here, and if we add just another layer of just same hatch marks, but a little bit closer together, that gets a little bit darker. And the same thing can happen if we move a little bit further over, gets a little bit darker, right? And gets a little bit darker. And you continue to layer and get lines closer and closer together. And then, of course, if you wanted to cross hatch, you could cross hatch over here. So I use mostly hatching, but sometimes I use cross hatching. I use a little bit of both, but I would say most of the time I use hatching. Let's just see how it works out. I think that will also tell the story. But mostly in my sketchbook, some of you guys have seen those in the past, and some of the older lectures before we really got the drawing database going. You can find them in the, I think, the figure section a long, 2 or 4 years ago, actually, before we got the nice camera and stuff. I actually made those with a GoPro camera. Those were really way too hard to make. This is so much easier and better now. But the point is, in my conversation, you can see me using mostly hatching. So this particular technique, I'm going to go ahead and pop up the image, and we'll be working with it. So we're in the basics, so we're working with the still life here. And I'm at 7 inches here, I believe, by 10. Let me double check and measure. So if you want to get your drawing close to mine, you can. It is 7 by, in fact, 10 inches. So my picture plane is a little bit longer than the image that I have popped up. That's okay. We can leave a little bit more space out in through here. So this will be a little bit looser technique. It's also a looser technique, which I like. I personally like looser technique. Now, one other thing, you can use graphite pencil to do your under drawing lay-in. I am not. I want to show you that light drawn lines and even in ink can be okay to show through when you want it, and also they have a tendency to disappear later on when you add and bring up your value range. So if you're a little scared or concerned about it, if you have a heavy touch and you want to start out with a pencil, graphite pencil, please do so. Use a very light one, like about a 2H or 4H. Keep very light touch, and I think you'll be fine. Okay. Okay, so the first thing we'll tackle here, and one thing also about my pen, I'll say, and then I won't say much more about it probably, is the nib is a medium nib. It's not a very fine point nib, which I have. I have others that are even tinier, but this is about a medium point. So this is a nice size. I could go bigger with it if I want, so just keep that in mind. Okay, let's start out. Let's kind of lay in the table. It is generally about halfway across in this composition through here, and so I'll lay that in nice and lightly. You hear me kind of scrape over. And if you want to still use a ruler, you can later on when you're getting those tight angles. Even with a fountain pen, like I'll come back over here, and you can get pretty sharp lines. Just be careful. If you get a lot of ink out there, you might smudge that line a little bit. I don't mind a little smudging. Also, this paper is particularly absorbent of ink and sucks in like a sponge, and it sucks in that ink fairly quickly. If you're using like Bristol board or Bristol paper, something that's got no tooth to it, this has got a tooth to it, the smoother side too, which is what I'm using. That ink might sit on that surface for a long time. If you draw across it, and it won't dry, and if you slide something over, it may ink over. So the surface you use really does matter. Okay, so I've got my table line laid in, and I'm going to push these objects. Notice that my picture plane is a little bit different. I think that's okay. I'm going to push over everything. So I'm going to start the cube a little bit further over in the composition, and it's because of the parallax of the camera. It isn't slightly 3-point and tilted. I think this time I'm going to leave it and keep it just slightly tilted, and I've got this straight edge to angle it from to help me out a little bit. So we're going to pull this in a little bit. So just developing a really light touch with my cube in through here, coming down, barely touching down. So I'm just going to come across here. And so I'm going to keep that angle. Notice if it was a true 2-point, it would stand straight up. So our head is slightly tilted down looking at the object. So I'll come down a little bit, maybe about right. Just a slight lean, not a whole lot. Nothing truly too distorted. And through here, so I'll bring this down a little bit further. And this will come in, angled the opposite way, just a slight bit. We're maybe tilted down 15 degrees maybe, just slightly right through here, and then of course over and through there. So it's looking pretty good, and I'll tighten this up a bit. Then of course if I wanted to come along with my ruler, or my hard edge, and say, hey, I want to get this to be a nice tight line, and just take it and use it in the same way. Just push down, boom. And like I said, the ink is the paper is pretty absorbent pretty quickly, and it takes it off nice and quick. So we're working on our lay-in, our ink lay-in. I might be a little long here, between here, but I think I'm okay. No big deal. And I'll start now, we'll lay in the sphere. So the sphere sits a little bit in on the box and through here. So a nice clean circle. This is where you might get in trouble if you're a little bit more inexperienced. You want to use graphite, and it's totally fine. Graphite's great because you can erase it. You can erase it out. I don't mind making mistakes with ink pencil. No big deal. As long as they're not too dark, they don't get in the way too much. We got that. We'll go ahead and get this cast shadow down here, starting to emerge and lay in over here as well, and also on the sphere. So we'll lay that in there. It hits that edge a little bit, doesn't it? Running through there, and this is all going to be form shadow later and through here, and then we'll come out with our cast shadow here. And on a straight, and we'll catch that cone in a moment. All right, so let's tackle that cylinder. So the cylinder's a little higher here, highest thing in our composition, so I'll put it starting here. It bisects about halfway, maybe just slightly over to the right on the sphere. Then I've got that lip. Sometimes what you can do, I'll show you a little technique. When you're drawing cylinder, I'm just going to put a straight line across and get the width of it. So from end to end over here, then about this distance coming down. This is horizontal, kind of vertical line that I'm using. No matter what image I'm drawing from, whether it's photographic or three-dimensional live objects, kind of same. It's all the same now, but when I was a student, it's good to get in front of the real things for sure. So that straight line could be here. It's just a good helper for my ellipse, because this distance here and here out, this curve out here will be repeated down through here. Here's the true center right in through there to get my ellipse working pretty nicely right in through there to gauge. That on. Okay, then I can bring my vertical down, sketch that out, nice and tight through here. So pilot pins. I don't have any financial stake in any of these companies, the Japanese Inc. and or the Falcon Justice that I'm using. It's pretty expensive, but you can get a good pilot pen or a good fountain pen. Maybe at your local pen type store. Kind of look around on it for it online for about $15 or $16. This one was considerably more expensive, and I don't expect anybody to invest in that kind of material unless you're really in it for the long haul. Okay, so the form shadow on the sphere, on the sphere and the cylinder too, coming down about right through here, okay, and over, and then we'll grab this cast shadow for now. It starts getting in this direction, and we'll wind up hitting the back ellipse over here and on over. Something like that, and this will come on over. Let me grab the sphere. I'm going to put a little highlight on here later, and it's going to be right about here. I'm just going to mark it. And then the form shadow on the sphere will be about, and it is right in through here. Because as soon as we draw these in, get these laid in, then we're going to block them in, mop them in really quickly. So this cast shadow coming from the other side of the cube over. Tell yourself what side, where's the light source? Light source coming from the left, slightly above, coming down onto the objects. Cast shadow here coming over a little bit. Then we'll start to lay in that cone. So the cone top is about, slightly lower than the cylinder, certainly and lower than the highest point or the highest curve of the ellipse. Thinking about right in through there. Let's see how that works out. We can always adjust if we need. Angled coming down, about a 30-degree angle of the cone. About right in through here. Feels pretty close. This might be too angled for the cube. Take it out just a little. Maybe just a little bit. And we've got the curve. Now I can throw a straight line across too to help me out. It's kind of a straight, kind of a triangle, if you will. I could come across here and through here. So again, compositionally, I push these over. Looks like I also increased their size a little bit, so I wanted to take a little bit of compositional change, which you can do. So let's work on now the ellipse, the bottom part of the ellipse coming through here and on over and curve through, and curving, and of course it would come on the other side about right through there. We see through the image. It feels pretty good. I'm going to tighten up the points to the tip here, and also on the side over here. There we go. That's it. So we're working pretty well through here. Now, what's interesting, a couple things that are going on. Don't worry about that line through there. I don't mind that line, little sketchy lines through there. When we add some lighter value, it'll take part of it off. Let it be a sketch. Show your line work. We're not drawing photographically. Photographic realism is fine, but there's a lot of other things going on in drawing besides looking like an exact photograph. Okay, so we come up here, and we're going to catch this cast shadow on the back. It's a nice fan shape all over and through here. This would line up and catch it maybe a little bit further over. We'll catch that since that catches it together. In through here. And then the cast shadow on the cone, moving about the same angle now as the cube, and moving about like that. We'll come back, and then this one has a longer way to go, so it's going to be a little flatter. And now, of course, off the picture like so. So form shadow now on the cone, coming down and over through that, and through here, and it kind of curved over just a touch. It's nice. And then we have a cast shadow now on the cube form, so I need to angle. This goes a little bit longer, and then comes out to about right there. So where it touches, notice it gets a little bit darker too. You have two shadows coming together. And you have the sphere shadow too as well. So we get two cast shadows for the price of one. How about that on the cone? So we get this curve on a curve. It stays pretty curved. So for the cast shadow shape now on the curved cylinder, it keeps it pretty curved, doesn't it? Now if we didn't have the box, it would probably end about right through there. So it comes over. over, and then it gets overlapped by the box cast shadow about right here, and this starts to go up. And notice how it gets a little bit darker. You're getting layers of cast shadow upon, you have 2 layers of cast shadow on the light surface of the cone, and so where they overlap the most gets a little bit darker. Pretty fascinating, and you get a little reflected light through here, even in the cast shadow. So you really have to know your stuff to start to control that. What if you were trying to draw this out of your head and you wanted something like that? Well, the more you study from observation, here we're using images. That's the best way to get the same vision. But do your own. When you learn these techniques and you watch the videos some, great. Rewatch them if you need to. But the real important thing is to get yourself in front of your own still life setups and make your own still lives. I think I should do a video on setting up still lives. That might be worth our while too for students that are outside of my university here in YouTube, what I call YouTube land. So stay tuned for that one. That shouldn't be too bad of a. Should be pretty easy to do. That a whole lot. Okay, so now I think we're ready for the mop in, or the block in of the values. Now remember, we're going to do a 1, 2, 1, 2 step drawing. It means light, dark, light, dark. So this is 1. I call the light 1 here, and I call the dark 2. And so we're going to help illuminate the light by putting in and laying in step 2 in the shadows of our drawing. Background, form shadows, and cast shadows. We're going to group them all together. All right, let's do that now. Okay, so we're blocking in. So I'm going to start blocking in now. I'm going to start with the background. Kind of really just move myself from left to right. And of course, I might have to change the orientation of the paper some. But I'll try to show you the same orientation that I have always, just like before. Okay, and the reason I'm moving left to right, a couple things. Drawing ink, and I've got my hand here. If I was doing it here and over, I might rub my hand in. But like I said, this dries pretty quick, the ink on the paper, so that's a good thing. It's very absorbent. So I'm going to start out, and you can vary a lot. I see, or you can slow it down, have a lot of control with this. I've seen some really cool drawings where it looks like an engraving. If you've never seen engravings before, that was an older 16th, I believe, maybe 17th that started, maybe even later, century technique, where engravers trained on their own. They're in themselves, they were kind of artists, and they would take paintings or drawings from an artist, and then they would reproduce them on a metal plate. engrave on them. And the technique can be sort of kind of duplicated in other print media and also in drawing, but it's really slow process, and they're gorgeous engravings. One of my favorite artists, illustrators that did Dante's trilogy, The Divine Comedy, is Gustave Doré, and he did his work, and then he had an engraver engrave the works, and they're just absolutely gorgeous. So take a look at that. When you look at money, any kind of money with engraving, like the old American dollars are engraved. All right, so blocking in. Notice I have an angle to my line. I would caution you from going straight vertical sometimes with your line work. It has a way to flatten out your image. So we're just blocking in now. And I'm keeping a very light touch, and then I keep a certain distance from the lines from each other. Kind of have to do that to get a value tone that's not too dark. Now I'm going to come in through here, and you've got that cast shadow. I'm just going to mop over this all in once. Go ahead and catch this cast shadow through back here a little bit. And through there. It's going to have an ink look to it. Ink looks different than other materials. It's a wet drawing material, or wet drawing media. So I'll go catch it here. And I'm going to catch this edge a little bit of my cone through here, just to kind of crispen that a little bit, because I'm going to catch this form shadow coming across just a little bit, slightly different angle, right in through here, form shadow, in through there, and then finish it off in through here. And I like working in pen and ink quite a bit. It's very fresh, very loose, especially for quicker, looser, quick sketches. Trying to make a couple of drawings in my sketchbook every day, my sketchbooks that I keep every day, just to continue to keep in touch with traditional craft. Because if you work non-traditionally like I do with my fine art work, where I exhibit across the country, you might lose that connection, because since I have to teach more traditional techniques at times, or mostly all the time, you want to keep that connection. It keeps you in tune to your historical background, antecedents, and who came before you, and all that good stuff. All right, so mopping in, blocking in these cast shadows on the cone themselves. Got the back here. Let me block in now the cylinder here. I'm now kind of working the opposite way, just like I said I wasn't, but that's okay. It dries pretty quick. So, all right, so we'll work the cylinder here, nice and light, nice and loose. I keep a very light touch on the ink. Through here. Gonna tighten this line up right in through here. There we go. Okay. And we'll catch the form shadow on the sphere in through here. Gonna get that cylinder, sphere a little bit back in place here, and I'll start to catch it. It's around here later on. Nice rounded quality there. Later on, get lighter in through there, and then I'll cast shadow under here, like so. And then form shadow on the cube itself. I'll kind of come in the diagonal, kind of way in through here. And then out to the cast shadow. Let's see, I gotta finish the line. Forgot the line here. Right in through there, and then kind of over. Okay. Alright, so we got a good block in going in through here. So now I've laid in the composition, light side and shadow side. So I've got now a 1-2 step drawing going on. Things are all blocked in, and so we can get more comfortable now and kind of dig in and start to go a little bit darker. So the first thing I'll do is I'll start to come in here and start to render now coarse shadow with the sphere in through here. So we'll start up in through here, start to hit this coarse shadow, and it's darkest and thickest in this ringed area. So I'm kind of overlapping my lines, so keeping it more hatched than anything else. And through here, then I can come across, kind of a cross contouring, kind of a cross hatch, emphasizing the curve of the ball a little bit. We'll come out a little bit further and through here, underneath. We'll start to catch the background. want more contrast against that ball. Every time I need to catch its edge, I'll kind of come across with a pen a little bit through here. Go a little darker. We're going to keep more variation on this background than what it has. It's pretty flat. You want more line value variation in your drawings. Through here. And I might get a little bit slight crosshatch going. Over and through there, catch that edge. Catch this edge a little bit. Working through here. Then I think I'll turn my image. So I've got some newsprint paper underneath the drawing to give it a little bit of padding. I always have that. Always good to remind everyone of that. And so I'll bring this over through here. Make sure we can see it on camera. Yeah, we can. There we go. Nice, pretty clear there. Now I can start to render a little bit further across that ball. A little bit. That helps me get a cleaner, better angle for me to be more in control. Certainly do this on your own if you need to. So this is working pretty well. Get a little darker here in this cast shadow. And we're going to fade that off a little bit. Make it a little bit lighter. Darkest right in through underneath and through here. So it's pretty close to what I want. I could kind of cross hatch just a little bit through there. It's working pretty well. Starting to sit down. And we'll start coming back up in through here now to kind of play off the ball's turn this way. And I can start to kind of cross hatch over. Get off the turn here. It comes through and up and through and around, kind of gives that sort of circular feel to it. And then I might soften up that reflected line by putting a few more lines to get closer together. And I'll come back to another pass, the foreshadow through here. This foreshadow moves in through here a little bit and it gets more reflected light underneath here. So just following that form. So it's pretty dark in there. It's 7s, 8s, 9s. Maybe not absolute dark, but I'm getting close to what I want. And that's about as far as I'm going to go for now. Later on I can adjust. I might have to make one more pass at it later. One thing, as I'm kind of continuing to go here, is the ink that I'm using is not water soluble. That means that, well, it is water soluble, sorry, that if I get this wet, it will start to run away. Sometimes India ink is not, and that's an advantage, so when you put it down, it won't, you can do washes of it. Here, if I put a wash on this would start to bleed out a little bit. They're good for these fountain pens, but that's the rub on that, meaning that they don't take ink that can dry and clog up because of the materials in it, the particles in it, so they have to be very water soluble for fountain pen. Just keep that in mind. All right, so keep going now with the sphere here. I'm going to continue to turn this, continue to turn it through. Of course, the highlight will be right in through here. So I'm going to put some on the back side coming through. And I'm keeping very light line, loose line, and keeping it a little bit further apart than I have in other areas. And we'll come across here a little bit more value. So we've got this reflected light over here to deal with. And we'll come through hatching and cross hatching. A lot of hatching and then some cross hatching. The more cross hatching you do, it kind of looks like weaving in a way, which is okay. Some people like that look. I'm not as big a fan of it, but it's just an aesthetic taste kind of thing. All right, so we've got that. So probably one pass dark over here where the core shadow ends, and that over here on the edge where there's just about no reflected light, just a little bit because it starts over through here. And now continue on with darker and lighter form shadow. Remember number 2 and 3 on our 6 properties of light. Through here, and you just try to go across that sphere and continue to make it round by just getting a circumference kind of feel to it as it comes around in through here. All right, and then turns in through here. Now the difficulty a little bit is you want to make sure you get some smooth edges. Form shadows right have smooth edges. Well, that's a little bit of a trick, right, in with ink. So the way to do that, now I've got to smooth out this edge a little bit, smooth these out just a little bit. So this dark comes over to the edge. The core shadow comes on over to the edge, which happens sometimes in reality. Leonardo might have left that a complete reflected light through here, or Rubens, or maybe Caravaggio may not have. So we come over here a little bit. Now, here's the trick. So, or not a trick, but the drawing technique is we continue to layer our line to give this smoothing. So see how I'll come in this middle section where there's a transition from the core shadow to the darker form shadow. Smooth edge. I've got to smooth this out, so I'm just layering line through, layering line through, layering it through, and a little darker through here, so more lines. So this is more hatching, right? So I've got some cross hatching under there, but now I'm doing a lot of hatching, layering the same stroking line, and it's starting to fill in the space a little bit more, thus layers of ink, and it gets a little bit, or they're getting darker. and I'm layering it. And then when I don't layer as much, I leave more space in between, it starts to get a lighter middle value, which is what I want, because we're getting right up into this highlight, right up over and through here. And I'll lay some white chalk in this area on top of it, or under, with nothing touching as well. So, okay, so I'm moving over here, and I'm going to darken in this a little, coming up underneath here. There we go. And this will go a little darker. That's looking pretty good.